Humans have become an urban species, with over 50% of the global population now living in cities. However, cities are not just our homes, but also complex ecosystems. One impact cities can have on the environment is the creation of an urban heat island effect, which means that the air temperature is warmer in the city than in the surrounding rural areas.
In this study, we wanted to understand how the urban heat island impacts the annual plant cycle, or phenology. That is, when the plants green up in the spring and when they shut down in the fall. This phenology is important because wildlife, such as migratory birds, depend on urban vegetation for food and habitat. And the life cycle of the plants is important for the impacts on the water and carbon cycles. Previous studies have shown that city plants get greener earlier than plants in the surrounding countryside because of the urban heat island impact. But little is known about how the plant response to the urban heat island varies at fine spatial scales within the city itself.
Here, we focus on the city of Madison to answer two important questions. First, how do urban heat island effects on phenology vary spatially and temporally? And second, do the changes we see in temperature correspond with satellite-based observations of greenness? First, we estimated the start and end of the growing season at 150 temperature sensors in and around Madison, based on when in the spring and fall accumulated temperatures exceeded critical thresholds for plant growth. We call this the temperature-based growing season, and it represents the potential period of time over which plants can grow. Second, we collected 110 satellite images from between 2003 and 2013. We used these to determine when, on average, vegetation was getting green in the spring and turning brown in the fall. We call this the remotely sensed growing season, and it represents the actual period that plants are growing in an average year. We compared these two metrics to each other and also to data about the composition of land cover across the city to determine whether urban density had an effect on phenology. We estimated urban density as the amount of impervious land cover within 500 meters of each sensor. We found that sensors in denser urban areas had a longer potential growing season with an earlier start of spring and later onset of autumn. On average, this added up to an increase in the potential growing season of a little over a week, or about 5%, within the city. Because this pattern was consistent across years, we hypothesized that it would also show up in our satellite data. Surprisingly, however, we found that there was no relationship between the temperature-based potential growing season and the remotely sensed actual growing season. We think this is occurring because of differences in land cover across the urban-rural transition. In older areas near the city center, most of the plants are trees, which are more sensitive to temperature than the turf grass in relatively new developments surrounding the city of Madison. This means that remotely sensed data can tell us about differences in phenology across a city, but not necessarily about the urban heat island, because of the confounding signals from different types of land cover.
So these results show that urbanization has a strong effect on the potential growing season of plants, and that this effect varies within cities at fine spatial scales. We hope that this can inform how we might design our cities to minimize the harmful effects of the urban heat island on urban ecosystems. In particular, since growing seasons within parks were less affected by the urban heat island, these areas may be effective refuges for wildlife that have evolved to live with consistent year-to-year plant phenology.
Our future research focuses on understanding how the changes we observe in this study impact the water requirements of urban ecosystems, both in Madison and around the country. Roxy, was that interesting?